in Seattle in nearly a century. She was first elected to the Seattle City Council in 2013, running openly as a member of Socialist Alternative long before Bernie Sanders or AOC were household names. Kshama only accepts the average worker's wage, and after taxes, donates the rest of her six-figure city council salary to a solidarity fund for worker organizing and social movements. An outspoken socialist who has taken no corporate money, Kshama has won 4 elections, defeating Seattle's elite corporate landlords and some of the most powerful corporations in the world, like Amazon, who have spent millions of dollars to try to unseat her. Socialist Alternative and Kshama have used her elected office to help lead movements that have won historic working class victories, which I could be up here for an hour if I were to list every single one of them. But, making Seattle the first major city to win a $15 minimum wage, the Amazon tax to fund affordable housing, and landmark renters' rights victories, of which we're continuing to fight for more. Please welcome Kshama Sawant.
Dear friends, working people are facing an all-out assault on our living standards. The cost of everything is soaring through the roof at the same time that we face the existential threats of war and environmental catastrophe. Meanwhile, billionaires and the bosses are making historic profits off our backs.
That's right.
The horrors of the bosses system are on full display in the working class town of East Palestine, Ohio, where one of the worst chemical disasters in American history is playing out after the derailment and explosion of a train owned by Norfolk Southern Corporation. The town is covered in heavy toxic smoke, and its river is filled with thousands of dead fish and frogs. Livestock have died, and people are starting to get sick. As one woman who found her rooster and chickens lying dead told NBC News, if it can do this to chickens in one night, imagine what it's going to do to us in 20 years. This apocalyptic scenario lies at the door of Norfolk Southern's executives and their major shareholders, billionaire plunderers from so-called financial asset management companies like BlackRock and Vanguard. What is unfolding in East Palestine was an entirely predictable consequence of sacrificing basic safety in service of an endless thirst for profits by the rich. Decades of safety violations and cover-ups, dangerously reduced staffing, scrapped safety inspections, and whittled down regulations. Democratic Party politicians are mostly ignoring the disaster. Neither Joe Biden nor any member of the squad have gone to East Palestine. This is no surprise. We already know that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are in bed with the railroad bosses. Paid sick leave, urgent railroad safety measures, and an end to dangerously low staffing levels were key demands of the 125,000 unionized rank-and-file freight railroad workers who were in pitched battle late last year against their billionaire bosses. Raising alarms about the dire working conditions on the tracks, including the heightened risk of dangerous derailments, rail workers voted to go on strike for a fair contract. And yet, in what can only be described as a sellout on steroids, both parties voted overwhelmingly in December to break the railroad workers' strike. Even the so-called progressives, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Meanwhile, Norfolk Southern made nearly $8.65 billion in profits last year alone. Workers' strike back volunteers have been in East Palestine. In talking to the town's residents, we have found that they are very clear that they are being sold out from every direction on every level. This is a microcosm of what is happening across the United States and around the world. Millions of American working people understand that they are being sold out from every direction on every level. There is huge anger, and with it, a historic opening for worker struggles. Support for unions is the highest in modern-day polling. Last year saw the launch of a wave of unionizing drives, including at Amazon and Starbucks, and the number of strikes went up significantly. But it is far from automatic that workplace organizing efforts will succeed, because there is a chasm between the unprecedented potential and the leadership that's on offer. There have been important working class victories, such as the historic win at Amazon's JFK facility in New York, but the norm has been either stagnation and a silent loss of ground, or outright defeats despite what is possible. We have a problem, and I think we should name that problem. It's a failed strategy called business unionism, which is unfortunately accepted by a large majority of the labor leadership. Business unionism is the idea that workers should let labor leaders quietly negotiate contracts with the bosses rather than getting organized to wrench a strong contract from the hands of the bosses. Business unionists put their stress on the bargaining process, and they fear antagonizing management by mobilizing workers, much less going on strike. This has been a total dead end, leading to steadily worsened wages and benefits and working conditions over the past decades. And we're talking about unionized workers, let alone the even worse conditions facing the vast majority of the working class who don't have unions to defend them. The bosses will never concede anything unless they are forced to, because their profits are directly derived from underpaying and exploiting workers just as much as they can. When the railroad workers were being betrayed, Amazon labor union president Chris Smalls correctly said, quote, "Union leaders of this country need to stop playing the fence and take a stance. Stop letting politics take away the rank and file strength. You either with them or not, there is no in between." End quote. And Postal Workers Union President Mark Diamondstein said, quote, "Many labor leaders claim that Joe Biden is the most pro-union president, but this administration and the majority of the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives and Senate failed the test by imposing a contract rejected by workers and without legislating paid sick time and fair scheduling," end quote. Unfortunately, these quotes were the exception to the rule. Labor leaders, for the most part, refused to publicly call out the rotten sellout of the railroad workers by the Democrats. Business unionism has meant not only that most union leaders try to seek peace with the bosses, it has also meant they don't want to upset their relations with the Democratic Party. AOC said in January, just after the House floor fight over the Speaker election, that she could not use fighting methods because it would cause, quote-unquote, reputational and relational harm. This is a rare moment of honesty by a progressive Democratic politician. It gets to the heart of the matter. These so-called progressives and the business unionists as well don't want to risk upsetting those in power. All this shows why we need a new party for working people. We've seen this unholy alliance between big business and progressive politicians play out again and again on the Seattle City Council, where I've served for the last decade. Our movement has won by mobilizing working people. The progressive Democrats oppose almost everything our Socialist Council office fights for because they value their position in the establishment far above the needs of workers or the oppressed. We just saw that again last week with the attempts to undermine our legislation to ban caste discrimination. Last year, City Council Democrats repeatedly attempted to take away grocery workers' pandemic hazard pay of a meager $4 an hour, with self-described Labor Democrat Teresa Mosqueda shamefully sponsoring the legislation in the middle of a COVID surge. Many of these workers barely make above the minimum wage. As I said during the final vote when Democrats repealed the hazard pay, today is the 7th time the Democrats have put legislation to end hazard pay on the Council's agenda. Compare this to how in the last 40 years, the Washington State Democrats have not once put ending the statewide ban on rent control up for a vote. I hope that rank-and-file grocery workers, both unionized and those without a union, who have been valiantly trying to fight back, will use Workers' Strike Back as their organizing platform. Working class people urgently need unions, and we need to rebuild a fighting labor movement. And there are many good left labor leaders who have played an absolutely crucial role in Seattle's historic struggles in the time I've been on the City Council. There would have been no $15 minimum wage without the support of the labor movement. There would have been no Amazon tax or the public funding we won last year for anyone who needs an abortion without progressive unions like WOOFC 1495, UAW 4121, and the UW Physicians Union. The problem is that the business unionists have been the ones calling the shots in most unions for decades. And we need a clean break with that. It will take an active rank-and-file movement to lead that break. If we are serious about turning things around, if we are serious about unionizing Amazon and workplaces across the country, we cannot just tweak the status quo. We need a reckoning. We need to return to the kind of militant fighting ideas that the labor movement was built on. That's why we are launching Workers' Strike Back. A section of progressive labor leaders have launched Enough is Enough campaign in the UK. Despite its weaknesses, the Enough is Enough campaign has shown the opening for working people to get organized, with over 750,000 people signing in support. So what kind of labor movement do we need? We need to learn from past struggles. History shows that power at the bargaining table comes not from clever arguments, but from our organizing power in the workplaces and on the streets. We need to organize around clear, strong demands. Clear demands can inspire our fellow workers and union members to fight and can help build regionally and nationally unified campaigns. Bold demands, or often even having any demands at all, are something that the business unionists strongly disagree with us about because they don't want to be on the hook to win anything for workers, and they don't want workers to get politically active. But that's precisely why we need to insist on demands that actually relate to what workers want and need. Our greatest power comes from withholding our labor. Nothing moves in this system, and the rich don't make $1 of profit unless a worker makes it happen. Workers have the power to shut everything down through strike action. Lastly, we are strongest when we stand together as a working class. We need broad campaigns involving workers from every industry, workers of every race and gender, full-time and part-time workers, public sector and private sector, contractors, and permanent employees. in our fights. We saw many of these ideas put into action by the Amazon Labor Union at JFK last year in their victory, where their rank-and-file organizing had clear demands like $30 an hour starting wage, 2 weeks paid off, and an end to Amazon's rotten time-off task system. Similarly, Workers' Strike Back is demanding that workers need a real race, workers need good union jobs for all, that we need to fight racism, sexism, and all oppression, that we need quality, affordable housing and free healthcare for all, and last but not least, no more sellouts, we need a new party. You can read the full program on the website workersstrikeback.org. I also want to be clear, Workers' Strike Back is not only about organizing the unorganized and fighting for better wages and working conditions. We need to unite non-union and union workers, young people and oppressed people to build a multiracial, multi-gender movement to fight back, not only in the workplace, but also for rent control, for affordable housing by taxing the rich, to hold corporations accountable for racism, sexism, and other discrimination, to fight for women's and LGBTQ+ rights against the right wing, to organize workers alongside students and young people against climate change. Workers' Strike Back is a tool, a platform for all of these struggles. The bosses desperately want us to be divided. Our strength is building the maximum unity we can around a fighting program. Not unity with the bosses and their political representatives, but unity on a working class basis. Some of the carpenter union rank and file who went on that courageous strike in 2021 were two-time Trump voters. We know there is disagreement on a number of political issues, and we need to honestly debate them. But these workers welcomed our Socialist Council Office and Socialist Alternative. We were the only force who stood with them while they were being abandoned both by their union leaders and by every single Democrat in the region. The residents of East Palestine who are being radicalized by this disaster are mostly Trump voters. Yet many of them are furious at both parties and saw Trump's bottled water delivery as an empty gesture. At the Amazon Air Hub, there are also lots of Trump voters. But we have agreement on something crucial. They damn well want a union and are prepared to fight for it. Capitalism relies on a divide and rule strategy in order for a tiny minority at the top to exploit the billions of working people on the planet. They need to divide us in every possible way and disorient us. We cannot let them. As a socialist, I fight for reforms because I think we must fight for every real gain we can for working people because our lives depend on it. But at the same time, we should not have any illusions. As hard as we will need to fight to win any reform under capitalism, all the reforms added up together will not be enough. We need a fundamentally different kind of society, a socialist society based on solidarity and equality, run by and for working people, not the billionaires. The capitalist system is owned by the bosses. It is inherently unequal and oppressive, and it is completely unsustainable. But I also want to be clear that you don't need to agree with me or Socialist Alternative about socialism in order to get involved with Workers' Strike Back. Workers' Strike Back is not a socialist organization. It is a movement of working people organizing around a fighting strategy to win the things we need. Millions of working people in this country are looking to fight back and are looking for the leadership. We need to take that and all the energy we have seen this afternoon in this room and turn it towards this historic fight. Solidarity.